hiring researchers. And she's like, don't you go to the archive? And I'm like, you're going to fly me to Congress.
Aloha, good morning, everybody.
Aloha.
I'd like to present our first panel for this day. I had the great pleasure to spend some time with these fabulous people yesterday on Holo Day. Brave souls to get in the band with me. But we all survived and we had a beautiful lunch. I think it might have been maybe first time for Hawaiian food for some of you. No, you guys are okay. Excellent. So, our first panel is titled Together, Increasing Access. What tools do archivists and collection managers employ in 2019 to ensure increased access to collections? Standards for providing preservation and access of archival resources are being newly defined through digitization and creating partnerships across institutions. In this panel, we reflect on present and future initiatives happening in archival organizations. I'm going to introduce everyone who's speaking and then let them go at it. And then afterwards, we'll have a 20-minute Q&A. So make sure you don't forget your questions. Adam Jansen, he's the state archivist of the Hawaiʻi State Archives. He is the former deputy state archives of Washington, where he managed the Washington State Digital Archives. He's also an independent consultant on the Inter Pares Trust Research Project. Okay. Robert Jackson, he is the Hawaii Area Manager at Family Search International. He joined Family Search in 2006 and currently works as a field relations manager. He develops new service accounts for partners and clients in the Western U.S. And prior to Family Search, he worked in the software development and consulting services industry as an associate with Booz Allen Hamilton. Next up, we have Mary E. Kenny. She is the Marianas Province Archivist for the National Archives of the Marianas Province. Marianas, sorry, thank you. Marianas Province, I'll never get that wrong ever again. Let me try it again. Aloha. Mary Kenny is the Marianas Province Archivist for the National Archives of the Marianas Province of the United States. In 2012, she accepted the project of centralizing in San Antonio, Texas, all the Marianas archival collections from the 5 provinces that unified in July 2002. Then we have Art McKay. He's a historical researcher at the National Archives of the Marianas Province of the U.S. And after a career in the federal government, Art McKay is doing historical research as a volunteer for the National Archives of the Marianas Province of the U.S. and on maritime archaeological discoveries for the Alexandria Archaeology Museum in Virginia. And then lastly, we have Erin Luthen. She's the University Archivist at Santa Clara University, and she is responsible for the collection, organization, description, and preservation of archival materials, personal papers, manuscripts, as well as the management and coordination of the activities in the University Archives at the University Library's Department of Archives and Special Collections. So with that, I would like to give them all a warm welcome.
Aloha mai tākou. For those of you I've not had the pleasure of meeting yet, I am Adam Jansen, Chief Troublemaker at the Hawaiʻi State Archives. And before we get started, I wanted to pick up on something that President Tanner had said. For those of you who are not familiar with the concept, European archives hold Janus as their patron god because he looks forward and backwards. You must look to the past to understand the future. And this concept is instilled at the National Archives of the United States. For those of you who have not been to the building, the northeast corner There's a statute called Future by Robert Aitken in 1935, and on it is inscripted, what is past is prologue. What happened will be the future. And for those of you who are really nerdy, they stole that line from Tempest, Shakespeare's The Tempest. So, with that being said, I had a song and dance number. Unfortunately, I had to cut it because of time, so maybe next time. Not if you're lucky. And so I'm going to be talking about ingesting authentic digital records. It's going to be very dense, very quick, time. So if you want to record it, it may be easier. Let's analyze these words. Ingesting, that is the technical term that is instilled in ISO 14721, the Open Archival Information Systems Reference Model. If you have not read it, I highly, highly recommend it. It's not that super dense, but it will give you a verbology and a understanding of the technical aspects that you need to start understanding moving forward. Authentic. That a record is what it purports to be. It is free from alteration, and that it is not a forgery. Digital, comprised of bits, binary bits of data, ones and zeros, and records. I see many of my students out in the audience, so you know that I'm a stickler about definitions. If we cannot define a thing, we cannot preserve a thing. So records, document made or received in the usual and ordinary course of business and set aside as evidence of that activity. This will become very important later because there's a very important legal distinction that is afforded to records that is not afforded to data. So we have a challenge, and that is preserving authentic digital records. What does that mean? I'll give you a hint. It doesn't mean throwing it up in the cloud. It doesn't mean writing it off on the tape. That if we don't baseline that authenticity as we bring those records into our repository, you will never be able to establish that authenticity after the fact. You have to get it at the point of its creation. So when I say preserve digital records, again, sorry to my students, that means preserving digital records of enduring legal, historical, or fiscal value from loss, alteration, deterioration, or technological obsolescence in an environment independent from that which produced it. Little more complicated than throwing it up in the cloud. But we need to have these to have authenticity. So, why are records important? Why do we do what we do? Well, first off, there's the right to know. Being from a governmental archive, that is instilled in the law. HRS 92F-2 says that the opening of the government processes to public scrutiny and participation is the only viable and reasonable method of protecting the public's interest. Therefore, it is the policy of the state that these shall be conducted as openly as possible. It is our duty to hold the government accountable. And we hold the government accountable through the records that are available. If you doubt that, look at the Supreme Court justice who was nominated and passed, and how much struggle there was, how many of those million records were going to be released, because there's power in records. More importantly for all of us, there is the concept of the Federal Rules of Evidence, Rule 803, subsection 6, that imbues within records made or received in the usual and ordinary course of business and set aside as evidence of that activity, special rights and exemption to the hearsay rule. Now, the hearsay rule means you cannot submit anything that cannot be cross-examined. You cannot cross-examine a sheet of paper. It cannot answer your questions. So under normal circumstances, data and paper is not admissible unless it is made in a regularly conducted business activity. Now, that business activity does not necessarily have to be fiscal. If you are a writer, it could be the process of writing your book, your manuscript, a letter. That is a business activity. It is afforded admissibility unless, the last line, the preparation indicates a lack of trustworthiness. There's an axiom. If you cannot attack the record, you attack the process. And if I were the opposing counsel, trust me, there is a lot of places to attack with digital systems, particularly if it's loaded up in the cloud. You can tear it apart all day long. Trustworthiness, by the way, is defined as, by the Inter Pares Project, authenticity, reliability, and accuracy. And we don't have time to go into all of that today, so we're going to focus on authenticity. And how can you demonstratively provide evidence of that trustworthiness? So, why are we relevant in the digital age? We are so paper-based in our thought, our processes, our mentality, we need to redefine ourselves. And part of that is that shift of the paradigm from paper to electronic. And what does that mean? Because records now are created in a completely different way than they were in the paper process. We have new ways of creation, we have new types of records being created, we have new processes routing them all around and making duplicates everywhere. So how do you tell which one is the original, which one is effective, which one was a draft? Very important to understand these things. And they do this because records have much greater potential when they're digital. Searching, sharing, printing, all much easier. But unfortunately, our filing cabinets have now become infinite. We don't have to manage it, we just get a bigger hard drive, and we load it up there. So I was asked on Holo Holo Day, what is an archives? And hopefully you all understand and can delineate very quickly in your 2-minute elevator pitch what an archives is. But I think it's more important to define what an archives does. Nobody does that better than Sir Hilary Jenkinson in his Manual of Archival Administration. If you have not read it, highly recommend it. One of the greatest archival theoreticians of the 20th century. He and Schellenberg, who was American, had the most amazing professional fight. They would continually try to one-up and disprove the other's theories. And so that discourse really helps define what we do. And Jenkinson said that it's our duty to see to the physical and moral defense of documentary evidence. I mean, just think about that for a second. Physical and moral defense. So it's not just preserving the records, the data, the physical object, but it is really looking at the naturalness, the process of creation. How did that record come to be? The interrelatedness. How does that record relate to the one that came before it and the one that came after it? Or records in a completely different form, or sous-form, or series, sub-series. The impartiality that we, as archivists, our only duty is to protect that record, free from outside influences, either political or monetary, that we provide equal access across the board regardless of intent, that there's a uniqueness, that each record stands on its own. How do you determine if you have 2 digital files that both say Annual Report 2016, that one came from this agency and one came from that agency, even though they have the same exact file name? And then finally, Sir Hilary, authenticity. Absolutely key to the physical and moral defense. So what does that mean? So we very often focus on the integrity of the record. Oh, well, you know, I've got multiple copies. It's in a RAID array. We're backing it up. That's not enough. That's the integrity, but that does not necessarily imply authenticity. Because I can do all of that to a forgery. That does not make it authentic. So there's a certain additional element in authenticity that we have to provide for, and that is identity. Those things that help you determine who sent it, the who, what, where, when, so that you can tell one version from another, the sender from the receiver, the drafts from the finals. So for a record to be, quote, what it purports to be, we have to focus on the chain of custody. How did we get it? And the process of custody. What did we do to it along the way? Because if all you do is throw it up on the cloud or backup tape, you're in for a world of hurt in the next 10 to 15 years. So I hope you'll be retired and pass it on. Because the file formats we use today, the technologies we use today, will not be readable in 10 to 15 years. You're going to have all your records on a beta when the world has gone Blu-ray 4K. Not where you want to go. So what we need to focus on are the elements of identity and integrity as we bring these records into our repositories. Because again, if you don't capture them at the time of transfer, you're making stuff up afterwards. And you don't want to be in that, because if I'm the opposing counsel, I'm going to eat you alive. So when identity, we need to look at these elements that are entirely capturable today in a digital world, automatically, if done right with forethought. So name of the person creating, the date it was created, the matter or action to which it pertained, the relationship to other records, documentary form, the digital signatures, and so on. I have 5 minutes. So. And then from the process side, the integrity side, who handled the record? What did you do to it? What programs did you use to modify that record? Because again, migration and conversion are givens in the archival realm. Here's an example. The Declaration of Independence. Again, apologies to my class, it's one of my favorite examples. The unanimous declaration of the 13 states of America. Very big, very bold, and then at the bottom, John Hancock signed it large enough that good King George could read it without his eyeglasses. So there's emphasis, there's importance in the words that they chose and how they chose to highlight that. If we strip all of that out, if we lose the documentary form because we're not careful about the migration process, this is what we get. Very, very different. Not the same record. So when it comes to ingesting these things, we really have to redefine what we do and how we do it. So we have a new process that allows us to provide better evidence of authenticity with stronger security. That we need to evolve current archival practices to leverage technology so that we're not going to get more people. That's just a given. So how can we make technology work for us? The digital records can't simply be dropped off on our doorstep and expect to hold up to that test of, can you demonstratively provide evidence of that authenticity? The informational content may be still valuable, but the authenticity and its legal submissibility is really called into question. Test, test, more test, and then go. And base it on international standards. Again, ISO 14721, highly, highly important. Inter pares is an almost 20-year research project now, because if you include the 15489, the records management standard, that came out of Inter pares research. So it's been going on, and it's just got renewed for another couple of years, so there's a lot of content on there, and particularly the Inter pares 2 book, free for download on the site, Experiential, Interactive, and Dynamic Records, Preservation of Authentic Records in Electronic Systems, is what Inter pares stands for. The Pittsburgh Project, out of the University of Pittsburgh. Interestingly enough, their whole focus was on preservation of records. All of their information was loaded onto the university website. It crashed. They lost all of it. Very good case example of what we do. And then diplomatics. I'm a huge fan of diplomatics. It's a very old study. It's required in Europe of all archivists to understand what does it mean if you distill a record down to its component pieces. And it's very, very beautiful. And my kumu, Dr. Luciana Durante, literally wrote the book on the subject. So highly recommend you pick it up. So the long view of digital preservation. To preserve these things, you have to baseline the authenticity. This is my last slide. You have to baseline that authenticity as you bring it into your system. Because you cannot recreate it after the fact. So that has to account for the fact that preservation requires migration and conversion. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever we're using now won't be readable in the future. And that it is this continuously evolving process. So we, as a profession and individuals, have to do the research to understand what technology is coming down the pipe, do constant verification of the integrity, test everything we do before we roll it out to make sure it doesn't blow things up. Trust me, I know this from personal experience. And that we have to verify all of these updates after we roll them out. So I also have an example of what this actually looks like. So I'm not talking about vaporware, I'm not talking theoretical. We have a working example of what this looks like, but time does not allow me to show you. But if you come to me over lunch, I'll fire up the laptop and I'll give you a preview of what this looks like. And I am done! And then email me if you have any real questions you don't want to ask. So. Wait, we had it. Almost there.
You bring a lot of energy, and I would gladly give you some of my time to continue this. Aloha. Thank you so much. I feel very welcome here. As I drove into the campus this morning, I saw inscribed at the front of campus, "Enter to learn, go forth to serve." And I'm an alma mater of Brigham Young University in Provo. So, I feel very at home here. The waters do not divide us. We feel unified. And this is a wonderful venue and a wonderful conference to be attending. Appreciate all the love, all the support that I feel here. I very much enjoyed our keynote address too. It brought a visual to my mind of my grandfather and my very first family history exposure and experience. I was telling one of my friends that as a young 8, 9, 10-year-old, I used to ride horses with my grandfather, and he would take me through the trees, and we have a family ranch in the deserts of Utah where we used to ride. And there was a place where we loved to go and have a picnic. And then years later, I found an inscription on a tree, on an aspen tree, that said, Orrin Jackson is a wonderful man. And it just touched my heart so much. I wanted to preserve it. And in fact, I did preserve it by taking a picture of it years later. So somewhere in my library, on my terabytes of slides and information at home, I have a picture of this visual that says, Orrin Jackson is a wonderful man. And I've tried to pass that genealogy on to my own children, and I have one granddaughter now and one on the way in July. So I hope to be able to ride horses with them and continue a family legacy and a family story. And then one of the special gifts that I have, just quickly, I want to relate this to you too, and then I'll start. But one of the mementos I have from my grandfather is his scriptures. And it's a treasure to me because he's marked them up. And so it's fun to go through them and see what was important to him, things that he's highlighted, things he's written in the margins, and so forth. And at our break, Adam was kind enough to tell me that there is an 1855 copy of the Book of Mormon that is in the state archives. And he told me the same thing, that you look at it written in Hawaiian, and there are notations and things that are, in the margins. So I'm anxious to see if they're in English or Hawaiian. But what a wonderful, what a wonderful memory. Thank you so much. My assignment today is to talk a little bit about family search and the efforts that we make to permanently preserve records of historical and genealogical significance. And I like to start off by just showing you a couple of pictures of how easy it is for records to be lost or destroyed. About 5 years ago in Hancock County, Georgia, the courthouse burned to the ground. And this is what it looked like before the fire, a beautiful building, beautiful courthouse, and then after the fire, this is what was left. And so we got a call from the court clerk there, and said, "Hey, Rob, can you please send us the record? You remember when you digitized all those records for us 20 years ago? We lost everything in this fire. Can we get a copy?" "Yes, you bet. We can send you a copy of the records that were destroyed in the fire." And just this last summer, in not Paradise Park here, but in Paradise, California, there was a wildfire that just swept through the town, destroyed the town, really. 500-600 buildings, homes that just burned to the ground. The picture on the left is a picture of the Paradise Genealogical Society, very similar to, we visited Wood Preservation Society. A nice little building, 1,500 square feet perhaps, ranch style, that houses lots of records, lots of paper, books, historical artifacts. And within a few hours, it just burned to the ground. The picture on the right is what is left, and there is not much that's left. You still see some trees remaining, but of course the records and everything are gone. And I got a call last week from the president of the Gen Society saying, "Rob, yeah, do you remember when you were here 25 years ago? Can we get a copy of those records?" So we're in the middle of trying to round up everything that belonged to the Paradise Genealogical Society and provide them with a donor copy. All right, so what is Family Search? Family Search is comprised of about 1,000 employees. It's a nonprofit organization, that's the structure, but it's much more vast. We have about 3,000 missionaries that support Family Search and its operations, and about 300,000 volunteers that do indexing for us. And we have a number of folks here today that have indexed records previously. All of you who have helped support Family Search in the past, can you raise your hands and just a quick visual so people can see who you are? And so after this presentation, if you want to talk to me or to one of our volunteers, they can certainly answer questions and help you as you go down this road of preservation and providing access to these important historical records. The organization specializes, they have entities that specialize in developing technology. I've been with the company for 12 years now, and it surprises me how much we invest in research and development. Things are evolving, things are changing. Technology is making our world easier than ever before to organize records and find records. They're literally at your fingertips. But we also have people that study language. They're expert in language and in translation. And on the FamilySearch.org website, you can pick any number of 80 different languages, and everything on the website is converted into that tongue, into that language. Not all the records are, because the records will appear as they were originally created. If they're authentic and validated, they'll be a representation of the actual record that was digitized in an archive. So the goal, really, the mission that we try and share is that we're always on the lookout. We're trying to sleuth and find where these records exist. So we'll find archives, libraries, and museums that have stacks of books or papers that might be on shelves. It might look like something on the left. And then our goal, of course, is to help get them in a format that's easy to distribute worldwide. I like the President's comments, too, about kind of worldwide ohana. We're trying to gather in all of the records, and we're all considered family. We want to spread that spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood all around the world. And so right now, we're trying to get to this point, and this slide is dated a couple of years. I would say, you know, I would hold up Adam's phone device and say, really what we're trying to do is get everything at the, you know, at the touch of your finger on a phone, on a mobile device, so that anywhere you are, you can access information about your family and your family tree. The branches, the trunk, the roots, it's a device that helps bring everything together at your fingertips. So just quickly, the process is talk to me or one of our volunteers, and we can sit down and review an inventory of records that you have at your archive and repository. There's some paperwork that we normally need to fill out because our services are free, but the hitch is that we are trying to distribute them through a model where everyone can benefit. And so yes, they're free, but we like to be able to put things on our website. And if you want to put them on your website, we'll help you put them on your website. The State Archives is building a wonderful digital representation of collections that will be coming soon. And we are partnering with Adam and his staff to try and accelerate that and make that happen. So just a couple of bullet points here to give you an idea of the size and scale of Family Search. We have approximately 330 cameras and camera teams now around the world in strategic locations where we've identified records that are at risk. And of those, we have about 50 cameras in the United States, and we have 2 cameras actually here in Hawaii. Soon to be 3 cameras. So we are trying to find more records to digitize and preserve, and we're working with Adam and his network as well to see what can be arranged for accelerating that process. This is a picture of our vault in the mountains above Salt Lake City. It houses approximately 2.5 million rolls of microfilm. When I first started with Family Search in 2006, they estimated it would take over 100 years to digitize all of the microfilm in our collection. And the engineers refined the process, re-engineered, I guess is the term we like to use, so that they could digitize everything in 7 to 10 years. And this next year, I'm being told everything in our collection that's genealogically relevant will be available through the catalog that's online. So if you go to familysearch.org and look up records, the Family History Library catalog will have hyperlinks to all of the digital images that have been converted from microfilm. I'd like to just show this bullet point at the bottom because for comparative purposes, the Library of Congress has about 20 million books, which is comprised of 3 billion petabytes, 3 petabytes of information that they store electronically. And in comparison, Family Search, this slide is a little dated, my apologies, but we're approaching 10 times that number. So we have about 30 petabytes of information stored now currently in our server farms. The benefits, I think, are clear. The cost of doing this work, we love to bid projects, and I can guarantee we'll be the lowest bidder if you'd like to try and work with us. And a question I always get asked is the types of records that we can digitize. Vital records are kind of the bread and butter for family history research. So birth, marriage, and death records, of course, are high priority for us, but there are other records that we focus on as well. Local census records, voting registration records, school records, naturalization records. All of these fit within the umbrella of things that have names of people, and that's really the most important criteria, is that the records have names dates, places where people can help find clues of who they were related to and how they are connected. That's what's most interesting to me about family history. It's not just a name, a date, and it's, you know, a timestamp in time, but it's the stories that you learn in the research path along the way. So photo collections, especially if you have names of people that are in the pictures, those are becoming wonderful, wonderful collections to preserve. And this is my last slide. So if you have questions, feel free to catch me afterwards or talk to one of our volunteers. Hello.